Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive.
Always ready to jump into the deep end.
Okay, good. Because today we're looking at cybersecurity news.
Oh, perfect timing. Lots to talk about there.
I know, right? We've got a bunch of articles from cybersecurity news sites, some industry publications, even some FBI warnings.
Yes, the FBI warnings always catch my eye.
Right. It's the kind of stuff that makes you want to double check all your passwords.
Oh, absolutely. Makes you realize how quickly things can go sideways and how much we rely on staying informed, right?
Exactly.
Oh,
So that's our mission for today. We're going to break down some of the latest happenings, but more importantly, we want to equip you with some practical takeaways, so you can boost your own security awareness out there.
love it. Practical tips are always welcome.
Okay, so get this. Okay, one of the data breaches we're going to talk about, it actually comes from attacks that happened way back in May. We're talking May 2023.
Whoa, so we're talking about a long game here. Yeah. Like a delayed reaction, right? Almost 6 months later, and the news is just breaking now.
That's really interesting. It underscores the importance of staying vigilant, doesn't it? These cybersecurity threats, they could stick around for a while,
Yeah.
long after the initial attack.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder what else is lurking out there, right?
Yeah.
But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's start with some of the recent data breaches that have been making headlines. The numbers are kind of staggering when you think about it.
Play it on me.
Okay, so set forth. They're a debt relief service, right? They had a breach. Affected 1.5 million people.
1.5 million, that's a lot of people.
I know, it's crazy, right? And then you have Presbyterian Healthcare. They had over 300,000 patients impacted by a breach.
And those are just two examples. There was also the Amazon breach, right? The one connected to the whole movie tit thing back in May. 2.8 million records stolen there.
Yep. That's the one with the delayed reaction I mentioned earlier. 2.8 million records. It really makes you realize just how much of our data is out there, and how vulnerable it can be. It's kind of scary when you think about it.
It really is.
Oh.
Especially when you consider the types of data that are often exposed in these breaches.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like with the set forth breach, what really caught my attention was the type of data that they lost. Social security numbers, addresses, dates of birth. I mean, that's like handing cyber criminals the keys to the kingdom for identity theft.
Oh, absolutely. That's the kind of information that can really do some serious damage.
Makes you wonder about their security practices, right? Like, how could this happen? And the fact that it took them, it took them from May to November to actually disclose the breach. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that delay raises a lot of questions about their incident response protocols.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising they're facing those class action lawsuits now.
Definitely a tough lesson in transparency and accountability.
Couldn't agree more. Transparency is crucial.
Oh, and then there's the law firm breach. Thompson Coburn.
Oh, yeah, I read about that one. Wasn't it medical records?
Yeah, medical records, treatment details, insurance information. I mean, this is highly sensitive stuff.
Sensitive is an understatement. And, if you connect this to the bigger picture, it just shows how attackers are increasingly targeting organizations, specifically ones that hold valuable personal data, especially in the healthcare industry.
It's worrying, for sure. And what's really unsettling about the Thompson Coburn breach is the lack of details. Like, they're not really saying much about how it happened, which makes you wonder about their security in the first place, right?
Yeah, the lack of transparency always sends up red flags for me. It's crucial, not just for legal reasons, but, it builds trust. And it helps other organizations learn from these incidents so they can improve their own security.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about ransomware. Because it's becoming more and more common these days. Like Halliburton, the giant energy company, they got hit with a $35 million loss thanks to the Ransom Hub group. But here's the weird thing.
$35 million. That's a hefty price tag.
Right. But they claimed it didn't really impact their overall financial performance, which, I don't know, it just sounds strange to me. Like, how can you lose $35 million and say it didn't really affect you?
That's a great point, and I think it really highlights the hidden costs of ransomware. They might have been able to absorb the financial hit, but what about the reputational damage? Loss of trust, potential disruption to their operations, their clients. These things are much harder to quantify, right?
Yeah, exactly. It really makes you think about the true cost of these attacks. And it's not just big corporations getting hit either, like the city of Sheboygan. They were hit with a ransomware attack recently, too. Disrupted all their essential city services.
Oh, wow. I hadn't heard about that one. That's a nightmare scenario for any city government.
Right. I mean, talk about a tough spot. Do they pay the ransom? Do they try to recover on their own? It's a really tough call.
These attacks on critical infrastructure, they're particularly alarming, aren't they? Because they can have such a direct impact on our everyday lives.
Mm.
And the decision of whether to pay or not, it's never a simple one. It's a complex ethical and practical dilemma.
It shows how ransomware is about more than just stealing data, right? It's about control. It's about disruption, leverage.
Exactly. It's about holding critical systems hostage and exploiting that vulnerability for profit.
Scary stuff. And speaking of those Movid attacks from earlier this year, Amazon recently disclosed that some of their employee data was stolen during those attacks. It's just coming to light now, like months later.
Seriously. That's wild. The long tail of these attacks is incredible.
2.8 million records were taken by a hacker named Nam3L3s. Amazon says it was mostly just work contact information, nothing too sensitive. But still, it shows how these attacks, they can have repercussions for months, even years down the line.
And what's fascinating is that the Movid exploit was linked to the CL0P ransomware group. But no one's really sure if they're actually the ones behind this specific Amazon breach. It just goes to show how blurry the lines are in the cybercriminal world, right? You've got collaborations, shared tools, independent actors. It's a real tangled web.
Definitely a tangled web. And speaking of tangled webs, have you heard about this threat actor? They call themselves 888?
888, yeah, I've seen their name pop up a few times. Lots of activity lately.
They have. They leaked data from Sproutbeat, that educational platform, exposed information for like 16,323 users.
Oof, that's not good. What else have they been up to?
Then they hit Appleton Harley-Davidson, compromised nearly 20,000 customer records.
Wow. Okay, so they're not limiting themselves to any one industry or sector.
No, not at all. It seems like anyone is fair game these days. And there's even chatter, though it's unverified, that they might have their hands on a massive Instagram data set, potentially containing information on 489 million users.
Whoa, okay. We're talking next level stuff here. Definitely need to keep an eye on this 888 group.
Sure. It just shows you that threat actors come in all shapes and sizes. It's not always, those nation states or these super sophisticated groups. Sometimes it's individual smaller groups that can cause some serious damage.
Absolutely. And it's not always about using some crazy, complex hacking techniques either. Like, did you see the recent FBI warning about the rise of those emergency data request scams, the EDR scams?
EDR, refresh my memory.
Basically, criminals are using compromised government emails to trick organizations into handing over sensitive data.
Wait, so they get an email, like an official-looking email from a government agency asking for information, and they just give it to them?
It happens more often than you think, unfortunately. These scams, they play on our natural instinct to cooperate, right?
Yeah.
Especially with authority figures, and especially when there's a perceived emergency. And the scary thing is, there are tutorials on how to pull off these scams available on, those underground forums for as little as $100.
Yeah.
It's become a disturbingly accessible tactic. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with data breaches. Let's move on to some specific vulnerabilities that are keeping security experts up at night. First up, critical infrastructure. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, they just put out a warning about vulnerabilities in these PTZ optics cameras. PTZ optics, those are used in a lot of critical sectors, right? Transportation, energy. Exactly. And these aren't just minor glitches either. We're talking about command injection, authentication bypass, and the potential for remote exploitation. An attacker could, potentially gain full control of these cameras, disrupt vital systems. That's pretty serious.
It is. So these vulnerabilities, they could have a very real-world impact, which is not good.
Not good at all. So what's the solution? Patching.
Yeah, CISA is urging everyone to update to the latest firmware, like ASAP. The deadline is November 25th, so if you're using these cameras, get on it. And this brings up a broader point. The importance of patching vulnerabilities promptly. Cybersecurity, it's not a one-time fix, right?
Absolutely. It's an ongoing process.
You can't just set it and forget it. It takes continuous effort.
Right. We need to stay vigilant. Updates, best practices, the whole 9 yards.
Speaking of updates, let's talk about legacy devices. Remember those D-Link NAS devices?
Oh, yeah. Those were popular for a while.
Turns out they have a pretty critical flaw. Can let attackers remotely execute commands, but there's a catch.
A catch. What is it?
The catch is these devices have reached end-of-life status, meaning D-Link isn't providing security updates for them anymore.
Oh, that's a problem.
It is, right. It's a common problem with a lot of older technology. It becomes a security liability.
So what can people do if they're still using these devices?
Yeah.
Is there a workaround?
Best thing to do is just retire them, Upgrade to a model that's actually supported and that gets regular security updates. Don't let outdated technology become your weakest link.
Sound advice. Out with the old, in with the new.
All right, now for something a little different. Machine learning toolkits.
Interesting. You wouldn't think those would be vulnerable, right?
You wouldn't. But researchers have been finding a whole bunch of flaws in these toolkits. We're talking about server hijacking, privilege escalation, even pipeline compromise.
Wow. That's a reminder that as machine learning gets more prevalent, it also becomes a bigger target for attackers.
Exactly. We need to start thinking about security from the ground up, especially when we're talking about these new technologies.
Absolutely. Building security into the development process from day one is crucial.
Okay, can you give us some specific examples of the vulnerabilities, the ones they've found?
Sure. So there's this directory traversal flaw in Weave. It's a pretty popular machine learning project. And basically, it could allow unauthorized access to files. Then you have an access control weakness in ZenML that could enable privilege escalation.
Privilege escalation. That's never good.
Right. And then there's a command injection issue in Deep Lake, which could allow an attacker to basically run system commands. So these are just a few examples, but they show the range of potential vulnerabilities that are out there.
It's a lot, and it seems like it's only going to get more complicated as AI becomes more sophisticated.
I agree. It's a rapidly evolving landscape.
Okay, one last vulnerability to put on your radar. Epson devices.
Epson, the printers.
Yeah, printers, scanners, network interface products, all sorts of Epson devices. There's a flaw that lets attackers create rogue admin accounts because, wait for it, a blank administrator password?
Are you serious? A blank password.
Seriously. You'd think in 2024 we'd be past the password 1 to 3 era, but apparently not.
You'd be surprised how often these simple oversights can lead to major security issues.
So what's the fix?
It comes back to the basics. Set strong administrator passwords. Use firewalls to protect your network and keep your firmware up to date. These simple steps can go a long way.
Like we said earlier, it's an ongoing process, right?
Exactly. And it all comes back to that fundamental principle. Security is a shared responsibility. Manufacturers need to prioritize secure coding practices. Organizations need to implement robust security measures. And individuals, they need to be aware of the risks and take steps to protect themselves.
That's a great point. It's not just up to the tech experts or big companies to keep us safe online. We all have a part to play. Speaking of which, have you seen that recent report from HackerOne? The one about the human element in AI security?
Yep, absolutely. It's a fascinating read. Did you know that 10% of security researchers are now specializing in AI?
10%? Really? Wow, that's a significant number. It just shows how AI is becoming, a much bigger part of the whole cybersecurity landscape.
Definitely. And it also reflects the growing recognition that AI is, well, it's both an opportunity and a potential threat vector.
Oh, for sure. It's a powerful tool that can be used for good or for bad.
Right. And what's even more telling is that almost half, like 48%, of security leaders now see AI as a major risk to their organizations.
Wow, that's huge, almost half. And HackerOne, they've seen a 171% increase in AI assets on their platform, which, makes sense given how quickly AI is being adopted across industries. But here's the thing, and this is where it gets really interesting. More than half of the reported AI vulnerabilities, they're actually related to safety issues.
That's concerning. Especially if so many leaders they're already identifying AI as a major risk.
Right. It makes you wonder if we're rushing to implement AI without fully understanding the potential risks involved.
It's a valid concern. And are we investing enough in AI security research? That's another question we need to be asking ourselves.
And it seems like there might be a bit of a disconnect there. Because the average bounty for an AI vulnerability report, it's $401 compared to $689 for traditional security programs. It's almost like AI security is being undervalued.
That's a very astute observation.
Yeah.
It could be that the industry is still trying to catch up in terms of understanding how complex AI security is and the potential impact of these vulnerabilities.
A whole new world we're stepping into.
It is, and it underscores the need for more investment. More collaboration in this area. We need to be having more conversations like this, bringing these issues to light.
Absolutely. Encouraging research, encouraging investment in AI security. But, this whole discussion about AI security, it brings us back to a really fundamental point. Human ingenuity. It's still crucial.
I couldn't agree more. We can't just rely on those automated tools, especially when we're dealing with this constantly evolving landscape of AI and all these emerging technologies.
We need those human eyes, that critical thinking to stay ahead of the curve.
Oh, absolutely. We need skilled security professionals who can
That's
think critically, identify patterns and anticipate these new threats. The human element, it's essential, even in this increasingly automated world.
I think that's a great place to
It really is. It's like we're in this constant game of cat and mouse with,
Yeah.
with these cyber criminals. And as technology advances, so do the threats, right? So we need to constantly be adapting, staying ahead of the game.
no rest for the wicked, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so with all this talk about data breaches, vulnerabilities, this whole evolving threat landscape, it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, for sure. Can be a lot to take in.
But there are steps we can all take to protect ourselves, right?
Absolutely. And it starts at the basics. Strong passwords,
Yeah.
two-factor authentication, and being cautious about those phishing emails. Those are like fundamental steps that can make a huge difference.
It's like locking your front door, right? It's a simple step, but it adds a layer of protection that can deter a lot of those opportunistic attackers.
Exactly. And while we're on the topic of basic security hygiene, let's not forget about keeping your software up to date. Patch those vulnerabilities as soon as you can.
Yeah, don't give them an easy way in. Close those windows. Make sure there are no cracks in the foundation.
Perfect analogy. And, beyond those basic steps, it's also important to think about the devices you use, the information you share online, and the websites you visit. Be mindful of your digital footprint.
Yeah, it's like being aware of your surroundings when you're walking down the street. You want to pay attention to what's going on around you. Same goes for the digital world.
Exactly. Pay attention to those red flags.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're using cloud services, make sure you understand their security policies. How are they protecting your data? Don't just blindly trust a service because it's, popular or convenient.
Do your research. Understand the risks.
Exactly. And don't forget to stay informed. Keep up with the cybersecurity news. Be aware of the latest threats and scams. The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself.
It's like staying up to date on current events, right? You wouldn't want to walk into a dangerous situation unaware. And the same goes for the digital world. Knowledge is power.
Couldn't agree more. Knowledge is power, and cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination. It's about being proactive, vigilant, and adapting to that ever-changing threat landscape.
And understanding that we all have a role to play in creating a safer digital world for everyone. Right?
Absolutely. It's a collective effort.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into cybersecurity news, I want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question. Okay.
All right.
Given everything we've discussed today, the data breaches, ransomware, the importance of patching, the whole evolving landscape of AI security, what one step will you take to enhance your cybersecurity posture?
That's a great question. It's a question worth pondering, really, because even those small actions, they can make a big difference in creating a more secure digital world.
Yeah.
Whether it's setting a stronger password, enabling two-factor authentication, or just being more aware of the potential threats. Every step counts.
That's right. We can all make a difference. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Man, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we?
We have data breaches, ransomware, those vulnerabilities, AI security. It's enough to make your head spin sometimes.
It really is. The world of cybersecurity, it never stands still, does it? Always changing, always evolving. It can be a bit overwhelming.
It can. Yeah. But that's why we do these deep dives, right?
That's right. To break down these complex topics and hopefully make them a little more accessible.
Make them look intimidating, more actionable.
Exactly. We want to empower you, you, the listener, to take control of your own cybersecurity.
To be proactive.
So let's bring it all together, okay? Let's talk about what you can do right now to protect yourself.
All right. Love it. So one of the most effective ways to protect yourself from identity theft, especially after those big breaches like the one it set forth, is to consider freezing your credit.
Credit freeze. Tell me more.
Yeah. So a credit freeze, it basically makes it much harder for someone to open new accounts in your name. Think of it as like putting a lock on your credit report.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do you actually do that?
It's pretty easy, actually. You just you contact each of the major credit bureaus. You can do it online. You can call them up and initiate the freeze.
So simple, but effective. What else? Oh, passwords. The bane of my existence.
Right. We all have so many accounts these days. It's impossible to remember all those unique, strong passwords, right?
Tell me about it.
That's where Password Manager can be a lifesaver.
Okay, password manager. Those are,
Think of it as a digital vault for all your passwords.
okay, I get it.
So it stores all your login credentials securely, encrypted and all that. So you only have to remember one master password.
Makes sense. And it keeps all his other passwords, nice and organized.
Exactly. And a lot of password managers can actually generate those strong random passwords for you. So you don't even have to, you don't have to try to come up with them yourself.
Okay, that's super handy. Takes the guesswork out of it.
Two-factor authentication.
Ah, yes, 2FA. Always a good idea.
It's like adding an extra layer of security to your accounts.
Hmm.
Even if someone gets hold of your password, they still can't get in without that second factor, right? Like a code sent to your phone or something.
Exactly. Makes it way harder for the bad guys to get in. Simple but effective. What else have you got?
Be mindful of what you share online.
Ah, yes. The good old digital footprint.
Exactly. Oversharing, it can really make you a target for cyber criminals. So think carefully about those personal details you post on social media, and always be wary of those phishing scams, the ones trying to trick you into revealing sensitive information.
Always be suspicious.
And speaking of scams, remember those EDR scams we talked about? Those emergency data request scams?
Yeah, those are tricky.
They exploit that trust we have in authority figures. So to protect yourself, you got to verify those requests for sensitive information, even if they look like they're from a legitimate source.
So if I get an email that seems, a little fishy, what should I do?
Contact the organization directly. Use a known phone number and email address that you trust to confirm the request.
Okay, so don't just take their word for it. Verify. Good advice.
And if something just, it feels off or it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Trust your instincts. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. That's a good rule for life in general.
It is. Remember, knowledge is power when it comes to cybersecurity. Stay informed about the latest threats, the latest scams, and take those proactive steps to protect yourself.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We're all in this together, right? Cybersecurity, it's a shared responsibility. By working together, sharing information, we can all make the digital world a little bit safer, a little bit more secure.
I agree. Well said.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive into cybersecurity news. Stay safe out there, stay informed, and stay vigilant. Until next time.